My family abandoned me when I nearly died in an accident. They didn't visit for 7 days because they were celebrating my sister. Now, 3 years later, the truth came out and their reputation was destroyed. I'm 25 years old, work as a legal assistant, and I haven't spoken to my parents in 3 years. The thing is, people always assume you're exaggerating when you say you cut contact with your family, like it was probably over something minor or you're being dramatic. But I swear when I tell you what happened, you'll understand why I can't even look at them. A few weeks ago, all this shit came to light with the rest of my family, and basically chaos ensued. And now my parents, Daniel and Carol, are begging me to help them fix the mess they created themselves. But it's not as easy as they think. I should start from the beginning, I guess. I was a college student. I was like 22 years old, and I was in my third year. I'd been training mixed martial arts since I was 15, so I was in good physical shape and considered myself a pretty responsible person with my life. My younger sister, Samantha, who's like 4 years younger than me, was pregnant with her first daughter, and everyone in the family was excited because she was going to be the first granddaughter. I had a normal relationship with my parents back then. Nothing special, but we weren't conflictive either. And my sister and I got along well, although we were never super close because we had very different personalities. She was always more the type who needed constant attention, and my parents were always like more protective of her than of me, but I never paid much attention to it because I thought it was normal. She was the youngest and all that. The day everything changed was a Friday afternoon. I was in the university library finishing a project when I got a message from my mom saying that Samantha had gone into labor and they were heading to the hospital. I got super excited because I'd been planning to visit her as soon as the baby was born. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to surprise them and get to the hospital to be there when my niece is born. I remember I even bought a small teddy bear at the university store before leaving, like one of those that have the school logo. I got in my car, a 2015 Toyota Corolla I'd bought with my own savings from working part-time, and drove toward the hospital, which was like 40 minutes away. Everything was going perfectly normal. I was on the highway listening to music, thinking about how exciting it was going to be to see my sister's surprised face when I arrived, and I literally didn't have a single worry in the world. It was like 6:30 in the evening. There was still daylight, traffic was flowing, and I was in my lane not bothering anyone. And then, out of nowhere, I felt the most brutal impact I've ever felt in my life. A truck hit me on the driver's side with a force I can't even properly describe, like the whole world exploded around me. I found out later that the driver, Stephen Harris, had a blood alcohol level 3 times above the legal limit and had run a red light crossing directly into my lane. I have time to react. To brake? Nothing. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital and not being able to move my body properly. I had fractures in both legs, a fracture in my left arm, 3 broken ribs, and a head trauma that doctors said was severe. My face was so swollen I didn't recognize myself when I could finally see myself in a mirror, days later. The paramedics told me they were lucky to get me out of the car before it completely caught fire, because apparently the impact was so strong that my car was totaled. When I woke up, the first thing I asked about was my parents, and the nurse told me something I didn't understand at the moment, but that broke my heart later. She told me they'd tried to contact them, but they hadn't been able to come. A whole week went by, 7 entire days, before my parents even called me on the phone. A week where I was in the hospital connected to machines, with pain I can't even explain to you, going through surgeries, and them nothing. My friends from college were the ones who were with me the whole time. They literally camped out in the waiting room and took turns visiting me. My best friend at the time, whose name was Rachel, was the one who talked to the doctors, signed papers when I couldn't, and basically acted as my family because my real family wasn't there. When my mom finally called me, I was so happy to hear her voice that I started crying. I thought she was going to apologize for the delay or explain what had happened, but no. The first thing she said to me was, "Nicole, we need to talk about your irresponsible behavior." I was in shock, literally couldn't process what I was hearing. She told me how could I have thought of driving at that hour, that I should have waited, that it was my fault for not being more careful, and that thanks to my recklessness, they'd had to deal with calls from the hospital during the most important moment of Samantha's life. I mean, the woman was literally blaming me for being hit by a drunk driver. I tried to explain that I hadn't done anything wrong, that I was in my lane and it was the other driver who caused the accident, but she didn't want to listen. She kept saying, I'd always been too impulsive, and this was a consequence of my decisions. My dad got on the phone after and basically repeated the same thing, but with more anger in his voice. He told me that he and my mom had made the decision to focus on Samantha and the baby because that was a moment that only happens once in a lifetime and that I was already an adult and could handle my situation alone. When I asked him why they hadn't come even once in the whole week, he told me they'd asked emergency services not to call them again because they were busy with Mia's birth and didn't want distractions. Can you believe it? They literally told the paramedics and the hospital not to contact them about their own daughter who almost died in an accident because they were too busy celebrating. After that call, I cried so much that the nurses had to calm me down because my vital signs went haywire. I couldn't understand how my own parents could abandon me like that. How they could so openly choose my sister over me in the worst moment of my life. My friends were furious when I told them. Rachel literally wanted to go confront them, but I told her no, that I just wanted to focus on recovering. The hospital bill was astronomical, like we're talking over $100,000 in surgeries and treatment. And since I was a student, I didn't have super comprehensive health insurance. My friends, these angels of people, organized a collection among them and their families and paid everything. Absolutely everything. I'll never be able to thank them enough for that. I spent 3 months in intensive recovery. I had to learn to walk again because the fractures in my legs were pretty severe, and the doctors weren't sure if I'd be able to train martial arts again someday, which was devastating because it was a huge part of my identity. During all that time, my parents didn't show up even once. Not one visit. Not one call after that first one. Nothing. My sister didn't contact me either, and I later found out that my parents had told her their own version of events where basically I was the bad guy in the story who had ruined her daughter's moment. So anyway, when I could finally return to my apartment and resume something resembling a normal life, I made the decision to cut contact completely with them. I blocked their numbers, deleted them from all my social media, and made it clear through an email that I didn't want to know anything about them ever again. 3 years went by like that. 3 years where I completely rebuilt my life without them. I finished my degree, got my current job as a legal assistant, went back to training, although not at the same level as before, and basically moved forward. I'm not going to lie and say it was easy, because there were many days where I missed having a family, especially during the holidays, but I also knew I was better off without people who had abandoned me when I needed them most. My friends became my chosen family, and honestly, it was enough for me. Like a month ago, I got a message from my Aunt Joyce, my dad's sister, asking if we could talk. I had a decent relationship with her before all this, but I'd also kept my distance because I assumed my parents would have told her their version, and I didn't want to get into family drama. I decided to respond, and she told me she needed to hear my version of what had happened 3 years ago. Apparently, my parents had organized a big family dinner to celebrate that Samantha had gotten a promotion at her job, like one of those gatherings where they invite all the aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and at that dinner someone asked about me and why I never showed up at family events. My mom, according to what Joyce told me, told everyone that I'd had a minor accident 3 years ago, but that I'd gotten dramatic about it and had cut contact with them because I was angry. They hadn't dropped everything to attend to me. She said, I demanded that my parents abandon Samantha during childbirth to come to me at the hospital for an accident that wasn't that serious, and that when they reasonably decided to stay with my sister, I'd reacted in an immature and vindictive way. They also said they'd tried multiple times to reconcile with me, but that I rejected them constantly, and that basically I was an ungrateful daughter who didn't value her family. When Joyce told me this, I felt a rage I hadn't felt in years, like I was literally shaking while talking to her on the phone. I told her the whole truth, absolutely everything, from the drunk driver to the multiple fractures, the head trauma, the surgeries, the fact that they told emergency services not to contact them, the call where they blamed me, everything. Joyce was silent for a long moment when I finished and then told me, Nicole, I had no idea. No one in the family had any idea it had been that serious. She told me my parents had minimized everything so much that the family thought it had been an unimportant crash and that I was exaggerating for attention. The thing is, Joyce is one of those people who doesn't hold anything back, so she literally started calling other family members to tell them the truth. My uncles started calling me to apologize for not having been there. My cousins wrote me supportive messages, and basically the whole extended family found out what had really happened. And obviously my parents realized their lie had been exposed because suddenly no one wanted to talk to them with the same cordiality as before. The next week was Mia's 3rd birthday. My niece, whom I'd never met because of all this drama, and Samantha had organized a big party for her. Several family members started declining the invitation when they found out the truth, like from about 30 people who had confirmed, only 10 remained, or something like that. And then, 2 weeks ago, my parents showed up at my apartment door. I hadn't seen them in person in 3 years, and honestly, it was surreal to see them standing there. My dad looked older. He was like 58 years old now and had gained weight. My mom also looked different, more tired. The first thing they told me, without even greeting me or asking how I was that I needed to help them fix the situation with the family. They told me that because of me, Mia's birthday party was being ruined, that an innocent 3-year-old girl was going to suffer because I'd decided to be vindictive and tell everyone what had happened. I told them to leave, that I hadn't told anyone anything voluntarily, but that Joyce had asked me directly. But they didn't want to listen. My mom started crying, saying I didn't understand how difficult it had been for them to make that decision, that Samantha needed them more at that moment, and that I should be mature enough to understand that sometimes parents have to prioritize. My dad was more direct and told me I needed to call all the family members and tell them I'd misinterpreted things, that they had wanted to be with me, but that due to circumstances beyond their control, they couldn't. Basically, they wanted me to lie to save their reputation. Something in me broke at that moment. 3 years of therapy, 3 years of rebuilding my self-esteem, 3 years of learning to live without them, and there they were asking me to save them from the consequences of their own actions. I told them to leave my property immediately, but my mom kept insisting, getting closer to me and grabbing my arm, the same arm that was fractured in the accident, and something in my brain just exploded. I physically pushed them out of my door. It wasn't anything violent in terms of hurting them, but it was firm, and I yelled at them that I wished they had to go through what I went through, that I wished I've been alone in a hospital, unable to move, begging for their family to show up, that I wished they felt even a fraction of the abandonment I felt. My dad fell to the ground because I think he didn't expect me to react like that, and my mom started yelling at me that I'd gone crazy. How dare I lay hands on them? The neighbors came out to see what was happening because of the commotion, and honestly, it was quite a scene. I closed the door and locked myself in my apartment, while they kept yelling outside for a few minutes before finally leaving. I sat on the floor of my living room and cried for hours, like I couldn't stop. It was as if 3 years of repressed emotions came out all at once. The next day, I got a message from Samantha, the first one in 3 years, telling me she was going to press charges against me for assault because I'd pushed our parents. She threatened to ruin my career, to make sure the whole family knew I was violent, and basically told me I was a horrible person who didn't deserve to be around any of them. Honestly, at that moment, I didn't know what to do. I was terrified they were really going to go to the police and that would affect my job because in the legal field, any criminal charge is basically the end of your career. I posted my situation on an internet forum because I needed perspective from people who weren't emotionally involved, and the response was overwhelmingly supportive. Hundreds of people told me I had nothing to apologize for, that my parents had gotten exactly what they deserved, and that defending yourself on your own property after everything that had happened wasn't something I should feel bad about. Some even said I'd been too kind to just push them and not do more. Reading all those comments gave me the strength I needed to stand firm in my decision not to apologize or give in to their demands. Mia's birthday party came last weekend, and according to Joyce, who's been keeping me updated, basically no one went. Of the original 30 people, only my sister, my parents, my brother-in-law's parents, and 2 of Samantha's friends who didn't know about the family drama showed up. The rest of the family, including grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone boycotted the event in solidarity with me. Joyce told me it was extremely awkward, that they tried to have the party as if nothing was wrong, but it was obvious the atmosphere was super heavy, and that my 3-year-old niece didn't understand why there weren't more people at her party. And look, part of me feels bad for Mia because she's completely innocent in all this. But at the same time, it's not my responsibility to protect my parents from the consequences of abandoning me. That girl is 3 years old. She's not even going to remember this party in a few years. But what I went through 3 years ago marked me forever. The fact that my parents are more worried about saving a birthday party than about admitting what they did to me says everything I need to know about their priorities. A few days ago, Joyce came to visit me at my apartment. We got Chinese food and sat talking for hours. It was the first time in 3 years I could really process everything out loud with someone from my family, because even though my friends were incredible, there's something different about talking to someone who knows your parents, who understands the family dynamic, who can validate your feelings from that perspective. I told her things I hadn't told anyone, like the nights in the hospital where I cried so much the nurses had to sedate me, or how I still have nightmares about the accident, or how every time I see a truck on the road, my heart starts racing. Joyce hugged me and told me she was so sorry she hadn't known the truth before, that if she had known, she would have been there with me. Yesterday I got an email from my parents. It wasn't exactly an apology, but I guess it was the closest they're going to give me. They said they recognized that maybe they should have visited the hospital at least once, but that I had to understand they were under a lot of stress with the birth of their first granddaughter and weren't thinking clearly. They said they'd always loved me, and it was never their intention to make me feel abandoned, but that circumstances were complicated, and both parties made mistakes. They also mentioned they'd decided not to press charges for the incident at my door because they understood I was emotionally upset, as if they were doing me a huge favor. The last part of the email was that they posted on Facebook saying our family had resolved its differences, and they thanked everyone for their concern, but it was a private matter, and everything was fine now. Basically trying to control the narrative again, and make it seem like everything had been solved when it hasn't. Several family members wrote me asking if it was true. We'd reconciled, and I had to clarify that no, my parents were lying again, and that I had no intention of having any relationship with them. The truth is, I'm tired, emotionally exhausted from all of this. Sometimes I wonder if I should have let the lies continue, if my life would be simpler, if I'd just accepted being the villain in their story and moved on without saying anything. But then I remember I was alone in that hospital, that I had to learn to walk again without my parents' support, that my friends had to pay for my treatment because my own family refused to help me, and I realize I have nothing to apologize for. I don't know what's going to happen from here on out. Maybe with time the family will stop talking about this and everything will return to some kind of normalcy, or maybe this is the new permanent state of things. What I do know is I'm not going to lie to protect people who didn't protect me when I needed them. I'm 25 years old and I'm finally in a place where I can say I'm okay, that I have people who truly love me, and that I don't need validation from parents who showed me their love is conditional. It's enough for now, I guess.